Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. This is take two of Don't Worry About the Government. You can see the first 10 minutes or so up on patreon.com. I will upload the video. It gets aborted midway through because I lose power in my apartment, which crashes Zoom. But the opening monologue here on the first story, I think, is good. It stands intact. If I don't like this opening monologue on this show, I'm going to replace it with that one. I've got a nice little clean opening section, and it was actually rather funny to see me just in the darkness with nothing but the blue light of my USB microphone, slightly keeping my face illuminated. Very spooky, very ominous. Anyways, how are you guys all doing? I hope you are well. It's just me on the show today. We have, I hate to say it, kind of a dire slate. I try to make these somewhat upbeat. The last episode, we had that positive bit of global news involving the global tax rate maybe being discussed and establishing a minimum tax rate around the world. And I think that's a really positive step. However, here on the domestic front, this week, there's not a lot of good news. Let's get right into it. The Trump thrall on the Republican Party is going to continue for at least another 4 years. Donald Trump spoke at CPAC here. And in his speech at CPAC, he did a number of things. One, made it fairly clear that he is running for president. Two, he started lashing out at people who maybe didn't stand up for him. We saw an example of this with what he said about Brett Kavanaugh. And he was upset that Brett Kavanaugh didn't stand up for him when it came time for the court challenges because he stood by Brett Kavanaugh. He could have pulled that nomination. That's what a true borking is, right? The Republican president pulls a nomination. Donald Trump didn't do that. He held the line for Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh did not hold the line for him. That's interesting. There seems to be a bit of score settling here in this new 4 years iteration of Donald Trump, and that's certainly something to watch. But the other thing to watch here is something that's fairly alarming, which is that Donald Trump is doing the Charlottesville treatment with the domestic terrorists on 1/6, saying that, quote, these were great people. If that sounds like Charlottesville, it's because he said basically the same thing in Charlottesville. He said these were very fine people on both sides. And he mentioned that maybe some of them were maybe bad on the protester sides at Charlottesville. He didn't even do that with 1/6. Let's get into some of the quotes here. The crowd was unbelievable. And I mentioned the word love, the love in the air. I've never seen anything like it, he said of his rally on the ellipse. That's why they went to Washington. He added, too much spirit and faith and love. There was such love at that rally. You had over 1 million people inflating the size of the rally crowd, the rally of domestic terrorists. And then he continues onward. And this is what the Republicans who are now going to be on that commission to investigate 1/6 are certainly going to use to schmoz up the commission. And that is this story of Ashley Babbitt. Donald Trump will give it for us. I don't even need to summarize it. Who is the person that shot an innocent, wonderful, incredible woman, a military woman, right in the head, Trump said. There is no repercussion. That were on the other side, it'd be the biggest story in this country. Who shot Ashley Babbitt? People want to know, and why. Ashley Babbitt, of course, was one of the many people who entered the Capitol without permission on 1/6 in an attempt to influence lawmakers to not go through their constitutionally required provisions in certifying the election, therefore trying to disrupt a constitutional provision, a constitutional action, basically creating terrorism. That is the textbook definition of terrorism when you are trying to stop a political affair using violent demonstration. Force in any way, forced entry in this case, is a form of violence, and that is exactly what these people did on 1/6. Referring to his own remarks before the crowd, before those people stormed the Capitol, he said it was a very mild mannered speech. Trump also suggested that the blame for any violence that day could be placed on Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats because they didn't take the potential for violence seriously. Uh, the one thing about Trump that this is part of what gives him such power is he goes all in. He owns it. And another thing about Trump that scares the shit out of me coming out of this speech is when he talked about impeachment. He was talking about Bill Barr kind of being constitutionally weak, not in the way that we would think of him as constitutionally weak, but being constitutionally weak when there were threats of impeaching Bill Barr. Like once there was actual thoughts of going after Bill Barr for the litany of things that he had done during his fairly short tenure as Attorney General, but one that will be quite memorable in the annals of AG history. And it's a storied and checkered past of AG history, too. Bill Barr will rank up there for quite a long time. He was talking about Bill Barr's reaction to impeachment as basically shrinking and demurring. That Bill Barr eventually said, "Oh, okay, there are certain things that I won't do." For example, he resigned before the 1/6 riots. Trump said of impeachment that it made him worse. And this is what makes me so alarmed about him running again and what concerns me a lot about the media's coverage of Joe Biden, or not of Joe Biden, of Donald Trump, Joe Biden and the establishment Democrats' reaction to Donald Trump, going all the way back to the primaries. Joe Biden said, and this was his pitch to the Democratic electorate, of which I am a part, that the reason we should vote for him and not one of our preferred candidates, that there were many, that he could get things done in Washington, that he knew how to work with the other side. And it was important to pick him because he knew how to work with the other side. And the other side, this fever that they've had, this Trump fever, it was going to break. That it was going to go away, almost like what Trump was saying about COVID. It would go away like a miracle. And Joe Biden promised this for a very long time. I've been making fun of it on Twitter for several months now, referring to it as coming to their senses, which is a Joe Biden line about this. They're not coming to their senses. Donald Trump is who the Republican Party is, and his imprint on the party at this point is now as profound as Reagan's or as profound as Bush's. And that's part of why Bush is so upset about it. Bush, like, really wasn't well liked by the time he was leaving office. Iraq, even Republicans sort of viewed as a bit of a mistake. So they didn't want to hang on to Bush and Bushism as the Republican brand, hence the Tea Party. Trump is the logical conclusion of the Tea Party. It's no accident that he was the birther in chief. And now, in these 4 years of exile, it's very clear that Donald Trump is going to run again, if for no other reason than it's good business for him to run again. But also, I think because he misses his clout, he misses his stature. It's fun and fine to fight with some of these people, but like he misses having a Twitter account. And the most surefire way for him to get a Twitter account again is for him to run for president. It'll be impossible for Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey, not that they even really care all that much, to say, "Oh, we're not going to let a presidential candidate have a platform on our social media platform," even if that presidential candidate is Donald Trump. I can already hear how this argument is going to shake out, and I'm telling you, Donald Trump will be back on social media. In the interim, this iteration of Donald Trump is essentially what the member of your family who voted for Donald Trump, who you like and think is generally pretty reasonable, and says things like, "Well, look, you got to understand." There's a number of different panelists on the show, including myself, who have members of the family who are like, "Well, look, I don't like the things that he says, and I don't like the things that he tweets. I think he's uncouth, blah blah blah." But you got to understand, Chris, that some of these policies, they're very good policies, and ultimately, he's not that bad. You got to leave room for me to be able to vote for that. What am I going to do? Vote for Joe Biden? And the answer is, well, yeah, actually, I mean, or not vote. I mean, like you don't necessarily have to vote, but like, I mean, you don't have to vote for the worst guy just because you don't like the other guy. Like that, you don't have to vote for the worst of two evils here. It would be my response on this. Right now, they are getting their sort of dream version of Trump. They know that when it comes time to get him back into Washington or get him back into politics, that he's going to fight with all the politicians and he's going to say all the nasty things, but he's not going to tweet anymore. They're not going to have to hear about like Donald Trump commenting on, black person or something like that. The things that they don't like having to defend at the Thanksgiving dinner that Donald Trump used to say. Those are all gone right now. Sure, he still puts out his lunatic little statements as the 45th president of the United States in exile or whatever. But no one reads those. I mean, I barely see them. And like, I know they're crazy. I've definitely seen them. And I'm like, wow, these are really nuts. And he's definitely like back to having full control of his own public statements, but they're not getting any burn right now. So Trump is kind of in an ideal state, and the party is still very much with him, actually increasingly with him. Here is a new poll out from The Economist that is just deeply alarming. So, first question was asked. Trump's challenge was appropriate. Democrats under 20%. I would love to know who this 10% of Democrats are that say that the challenge of the election was appropriate. You have 40% among independents. Over 80% of Republicans say that the challenge was appropriate. Then we go to vote by mail increases voter fraud. Over 80% again says that is true among the Republican electorate. Not confident in the national vote count. 80% of Republicans not confident. A lot of vote by mail fraud. 70 something percent of Republicans. Trump really won. Over 65% of Republicans, right around 67% of Republicans say Trump really won the election. Joe Biden is not the legitimate president. Interesting. If Trump really won, this somehow drops off a little bit more. It's just the statement hurts a little bit more. But like, here's a better way of thinking about this too. When we argue with people, so often we think, okay, I'm going to play the evidence card, and the evidence card is going to make the person go, oh, you got me, copper. And then they're going to flip and they're going to acquiesce. Instead, what we tend to see is a gradual demurring, right? Like a gradual retreat, like a way of sort of salvaging, well, I'm still somewhat right about this in some way. There's got to be a way that I'm still hanging on, right? This is, I think, exactly what we're seeing with Trump really won going down to Biden is not the legitimate president. Like, how can 67% believe one, but not, and then 62% believe the other? Look at the 5% difference. Then we get to not important for Trump to acknowledge Biden. Interestingly, this is lower. We're now at like 55%, but again, 55% of the Republican electorate says, it doesn't really matter if Donald Trump actually recognizes Joe Biden as the Democratic president. We get down to Trump should never concede. Trump should never concede. It is July 14th as I'm taping this. That number over 50%. What all of these numbers should be telling you in a very, very clear way. And again, only one poll. But what these numbers should be telling you is, and this actually, I'm sorry, goes back. This is a November 2020 poll, late November 2020. This should tell you where the Republican electorate's head is at. They are going to hang on. They're going to keep hanging on. It is a real, real problem. Give me 1 second here. Sorry, for those of you on the video feed, I wanted to make sure that we don't have background noise humming from my refrigerator during the rest of this episode here, because my refrigerator gets sometimes very loud when I'm taping these. I try to unplug it otherwise. Representative Mo Brooks says that he can't be sued for inciting the Capitol riot because he's a federal employee. So you see, if you're a federal employee, you can't be sued for engaging in domestic terrorism. That's definitely how it works. Republicans said that he acted as a member of Congress when he gave a fiery speech with Trump on January 6th, urging the crowd to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. So essentially, he's hiding behind the I'm a member of Congress, and as a member of Congress, we were given, oh, what's their speech exemption? I think it might even just be called the speech exemption. Basically, they're given a free speech exemption that's supposed to give them a very, very wide berth of things that they could say without any sort of penalty. This is a clear abuse of this. Mo Brooks is one of the many bad actors that look. Pelosi's at a crossroads and needs to decide what she's going to do. I think she already has. She's going to do nothing, and in this sense, there's a deep indulgence of the Republicans, and it kind of continues. I guess okay. There is one bit of positive news here this week. I'm not going to give Joe Biden Mondo cookies on this, but given the fact that George Bush at this late date still refuses to admit that the invasion of Iraq was on false pretenses. So as we engage in the rehabilitation of George W. Bush or whatever, I don't know why that got air quotes on the video feed, but as we do the rehabilitation of George W. Bush, let us not forget that he's never admitted that he was absolutely 100% wrong to commit trillions of dollars in U.S. resources, massively inflating the U.S. defense budget for like a decade plus, in addition to creating a wartime expenditure that was upwards of $1 trillion annually. So, like, when you combine the defense budget plus the actual war budget, I mean, this was a very, very, very expensive war. That was fruitless, that paid no dividends. I mean, we never ask when it comes to foreign policy, what's the return on investment, the same way that Republicans and, those who are worried about the deficit, those who want to be responsible, you see, like the Chris Coonses of the world and the Joe Manchins of the world, they never seem to ask about return on investment with Afghanistan or return on investment with Iraq. And these are massive, massive budgetary expenses and budgetary commitments. Now, in the rearview mirror, yes, but a 2 decade long occupation with the military mission in Afghanistan finally coming to a meaningful close on August 31st. Joe Biden insisted, quote, first of all, the mission hasn't failed, but also pointed out that no nation has ever unified Afghanistan and that empires have gone there and not done it. And I guess that would now put us in that collection. Along with the withdrawal of troops, the United States is working on airlifting over 60,000 Afghans, 18,000 interpreters, and their families out of the country to protect them from Taliban reprisal. This is cool. I will give Biden and the administration credit on this because, like, think about it. Do you really believe that Trump would do this? Or do you think that the generals and stuff would be quietly fighting with Trump to get him to do this, but we'd have another Kurds situation on our hands? I think one or two things is possible. One, Trump just stays in Afghanistan so we never get these people out, which is probably they want to get out, would be my suspicion. If once they, tossed him with the United States. Two, I think that you could have seen Trump withdraw from Afghanistan largely, keep some small amount of troops left in Afghanistan, and then, leave all of these Afghanis, these 60,000 Afghanis who helped us during this bungling, leave them out to dry to the Taliban. That's pretty terrifying stuff here. So I guess it's good news. Here's the thing with Joe Biden. I can't give him really big credit on this because Joe Biden's like one of these people who cheerleaded on this war on the Democratic side. This war enjoyed bipartisan support in no small part because of Joe Biden when he was a senator and sitting on like the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the Armed Services Committee and all of these sorts of committees and like the foreign policy things, the ones that McCain used to be on. He was McCain's buddy, and him and Hillary Clinton and John McCain would go around the world and discuss how the United States was going to dominate it in the 21st century. And this project in Afghanistan, yeah, we like to blame it on the neocons. Yeah, we like to blame it on Donald Rumsfeld, but Joe Biden had just as much of a hand in it. So it's great that Joe Biden is having some hand in cleaning up the mess that he had some hand in making. But in that context, if someone comes to your house and makes or contributes in no small part to making a mess and then sort of helps you clean it up way after the fact. I mean, how thrilled are you about that? That's about how thrilled I am with Joe Biden right now when it comes to withdrawing from Afghanistan. It's better than nothing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, again, if it was Trump, I think this would be worse, not better. But this is also not great. And what happened here over the last couple of decades is not great. And the fact that, again, Joe Biden, I don't know, has ever really kind of forcefully said that this project overseas was a mistake. I mean, he's saying the mission hasn't failed, other than saying no nation has ever unified Afghanistan. And that was part of the plan. I did not go and dig up the Bush quotes, but when they were selling sunshine and roses, and they were selling sunshine and roses, they were talking about a unified Afghanistan, a unified Iraq, figuring out a way to harmonize the Sunni, Shiite, and Kurdish um, different disparate religious sects with the Sunni majority. So the Shia and the Kurds would find a way to find representation with the Sunnis in Iraq. And meanwhile, Afghanistan, which has never really had a democracy, circa the year 2000, was going to find a way to create infrastructure in this very hilly, expensive to develop out, and also a place that they'd really like to mine out terrain. Yeah, like that was going to happen in Afghanistan. This mission was a failure. It was absolutely a failure. And Joe Biden's inability to admit that at this late date, it mirrors his inability to admit at this late date that marijuana is actually not some sort of moral ill, and that it shouldn't be treated any differently than alcohol in the workplace, behind the wheel. Like all people like me are asking for is treat marijuana like you treat alcohol. Let people brew alcohol at home, which you do. Let people grow marijuana at home, use it at home, put penalties for using it behind the wheel, regulate where it can be bought at storefronts and that sort of thing. Joe Biden at this late date still way behind on that issue. Joe Biden at this late date still way behind on the notion that the Republicans are going to come to their senses. They are most certainly not coming to their senses. The fever is not lifting. Joe Biden at this late date still married to the filibuster. Joe Biden at this late date needing to be moved by his own Department of Education on student loans. They're pushing harder than Joe Biden is. The guy's just a step behind. And I, of course, every time I fire off one of these riffs, I stop myself and I think, at least later on in the editing room, but I'll do it here live on the air now that I have some time and it's just me this time. I think, well, Chris, that's just because you follow the news. And I bet rank and file Democrats are largely okay with this. But I don't really know that yet because I haven't really talked to rank and file Democrats. I don't know how deep the want for Joe Biden to do more is. I will certainly concede, look, there's not popular outrage for a large litany of things. And so, like, why don't things get done? Or, like, why do we get served crap for dinner sometimes from our politicians? I think it's because, like, we don't say we're not okay with it. If we said we weren't okay with getting served crap for dinner, we wouldn't get served crap for dinner. But, like, why does Trump continue to have a hold on the Republican Party? Because they're okay with what's being served. Why does Joe Biden have a hold on the Democratic electorate? Because they're largely okay with what's being served. It's not me. Ain't where I'm at, but like it is where some are at, and you got to respect that. We did lose the primaries. By we, I mean the progressives. One positive bit of information here. I mentioned this on a previous episode, so I wanted to get into it on this one. A top Biden ally pleads with him to scrap filibuster for election reform. Now, this is another thing that Joe Biden is a bitter clinger when it comes to. But Jim Clyburn, who really handed Joe Biden a lifeline in South Carolina and kept him in the race as much as anything. I mean, you look back at the way those primaries shook out. If Joe Biden didn't win South Carolina, and Bernie Sanders was sort of holding on to the nominal lead, and had been able to negotiate something with Warren to get her out and get like an endorsement of Warren to Sanders. There's a path where maybe Bernie wins the nomination. Maybe. I mean, like, I guess we could say it the same way if Sanders had dropped out and endorsed Warren. There's a path where maybe. But Sanders had already won New Hampshire, so I would have went with Sanders. Maybe though, it's very slim. But I mean, you know, who is responsible for Joe Biden getting the nomination? If you're looking for any single one person, I think Jim Clyburn. I'm not saying he has the majority share, but I don't know there's any one person who has a better claim to saying I handed Joe Biden the nomination. Jim Clyburn says that Joe Biden should endorse the idea of creating a carve out to the legislative filibuster in the Senate for legislation that applies to the Constitution. In effect, the reform would make it possible for Democrats to pass their sweeping election reforms bill and another bill reauthorizing key sections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act with just Democratic support. I mean, here's the thing that I think about with this. I'm fine with it. The problem with the Democrats is they'll go small, but like if they really believed this, you could then turn around and use this for gun legislation because you could say that applies to the Second Amendment. And if like the Democrats had balls and did that and use this as a way of sneaking it past Cinema and Mansion and getting them to support something that they later backdoor and take advantage of, oh holy shit, my God, my kingdom for this Democratic Party. Like that's a thing that like Trump and all of his boorishness would do. He would just lie to Joe Manchin and Cinema, get them to agree to something, and then stab him in the back later on. You kind of gotta like that. You kind of gotta admire that on some level. I mean, he doesn't use it for anything good, but that's a thing that I would love to see Joe Biden do to Joe Manchin and Christian Cinema, who I did not vote for president in the last election. This is a sentiment that Jim Clyburn says that he shared with Counselor Steve Ricchetti and the Office of Public Engagement Director Cedric Richmond as well. I've even told this to the vice president, Clyburn said. Biden could, quote, pick up the phone and tell Joe Manchin, hey, we should do a carve out, Clyburn said, referring to Joe Manchin. I mean, like, also, here's Clyburn saying very, very clearly Joe Manchin wields like all the power in the Senate right now. And anyone who tells you otherwise, who pretends that it's like more complicated than that, and like it is, obviously, there are other squish Democrats, Chris Coons, John Tester. You know, the people such as these, who you have to worry about who could potentially be smoked out. But like Joe Manchin and Cinema are very clearly the power brokers here, and it's particularly Manchin because Manchin's a real threat to flip parties. And the Democrats would lose the seat if that happened because they wouldn't be able to get it back from anyone. Joe Manchin would win re-election because he'd be the incumbent. He'd be on the Republican side. The state's flipped Republican. They don't have a good brand. I mean, who you'd want to run against Joe Manchin would be like Richard Ojeda. But like the Democrats are clearly not into Richard Ojeda like that. I mean, he's slightly problematic or whatever with some of his views, I guess. I don't remember, but I kind of remember that being a thing. But they've not been in on him, and Joe Manchin's been a protected brand. And the way he's been playing this, he's been ensuring that he is a protected brand. So if he flipped on them, it's not like Democrats could field anyone against him. Clyburn knows this. I mean, look, like everyone sort of knows this quietly. Like it's just like it's instinct. It's the water they swim in. So then Clyburn says Biden could pick up the phone and tell Joe Manchin, let's do this carve out. And I think, look, the Democrats know that they need to do this. This is going to continue to be a challenge. It's why you see the House Democrats here in Texas leaving the House, and there's now threats of them getting arrested and this sort of thing because they are protesting the Texas state legislature's attempt to limit voting rights. I'll give the Democrats in Texas here some credit. Look, some of it's show and some of it's theatrics, of course. Look, Wendy Davis, some of it was show and some of it was theatrics, of course. But like, you actually need to fight for certain states, and Texas is the one hit KO. It's the thing that the Republicans are clearly scared about. It's why Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick and Ted Cruz and Dan Crenshaw and all of these people are really trying to build up their national brand and really make the national party realize that they also need to be playing defense in Texas. This is a great opportunity for the Democratic Party, but they need to be able to have elections where their people can come out and vote, and where their people don't have to stand in lines for 8 to 10 hours to do so. And the only way to do that is to pass federal laws, which will then go and get challenged in the courts. Let's be clear about this, that like this is going to be an ongoing back and forth sort of thing. However, the Democrats can make something the law of the land until it gets struck down by the Supreme Court. And it's not necessarily the case that something struck down by the Supreme Court can be retroactively applied to another thing. So it'll be applied to that specific case, but it will take time to get all these things applied. So the Democrats can stay ahead on this, and they're probably going to have to. But Clyburn said if Democrats don't get two of these voting rights bills before Congress to Joe Biden's desk soon, Democrats can kiss the majority goodbye. Clyburn being really clear here that this is not going to be about defund the police or whatever bullshit excuse the Democrats come up with should they lose in 2022, which is not a foregone conclusion. Odds in history say, yeah, it's likely, but it's not a foregone conclusion. But should they lose, Jim Clyburn, the whip, the guy who got Joe Biden the presidency, a centrist, says that it's going to be because these voting rights bills didn't get passed when the Democrats had the majority. He says, I can see in a state like Georgia where people stepped up in January the way nobody thought they ever would. Remember those special elections? Remember those special elections? All the promises made if we just delivered a Democratic majority in the Senate. Boy, the Democrats need to hope that their base does not start remembering those elections. I can see the disappointment to voters to the extent that Raphael Warnock would not be back. I can also see that disappointment. Um, Raphael Warnock is a candidate worth fighting for as well. I'm a guy who is fond of Warnock. I don't agree with like every one of his views or whatever. I'm not a religious guy, but Warnock I think is an important part of the Democratic diaspora to have represented in a fine one at that. A fighter, a savvy politician. Cool to have someone who's not of a lawyer background in Congress too. Even if you want to say, well, he's a preacher, at least it's not a lawyer. That's something different. In response to Clyburn's comments, a White House official noted that Biden had respect and admiration for the congressman. Yeah, you better. And the president supported a talking filibuster, which requires a senator or a group of senators to physically be on the floor to stall a bill. But Biden has dodged questions about whether he believes the filibuster legislation should no longer have to meet a 60 vote threshold to pass. He can't even take a position on this, much like Sha'Carri Richardson. Well, I mean, who he kind of did take a position on by not taking a position. But I mean, even Representative John Yarmouth from Kentucky said, I hope that the president gets a little bit more aggressive because Yarmouth might lose his seat if the Republicans decide to gerrymander the districts in Kentucky during redistricting. Obviously, they have a very full plate and they're trying to deal with a lot of things, but there are many of us who believe, particularly after the Supreme Court decision, that we really are at a critical juncture in terms of protecting democracy. Uh, yeah, yeah, we sure are. The Democrats need to be able to win elections because close elections, it's very clear. The Republicans are emotionally committed and now have been trained to schmoz them up. The Democrats need to win. They need to utilize their popular vote advantage in the places where they have a popular vote advantage. One of the big problems for the Democratic Party, nationally speaking, is that like their electorate is very poorly distributed, and the Republicans are comparatively very favorably distributed, given the nature of the electoral college map. Not having a popular vote system really hurts the Democratic Party. I just too many Democrats in New York and California. If they were in other states, it would make such a massive difference. Sprinkling, 3 million here, 3 million here, 3 million here, 3 million here. Still winning New York, still winning California. Also dropping those EC votes, making some of these other places, like it's not hard to imagine an electoral college map where the Democrats had much more favorable footing. And that's a big thing that hurts them in the electoral college, in addition to other inequities that we've talked about in the past on this show. That's one that I think is a fair one to bring up. Like, look, they really are just starting from poor distribution. But in this case, they need to be able to win in these close elections. And they need to be able to hang. Look, the Democrats need to win until this Trump fever breaks. I don't think the fever broke in 2020, unlike what Joe Biden and I guess Joe Manchin sort of believe. I think that the fever is not going to break until the Republicans lose for like a generation. I'm serious at this point. Like they need to lose for 15, 18 years. And if you're listening to the show and you don't believe me on that, and like you really think like they can kind of like get back to normalcy within like 8 to 10 years, I'm like really open to hearing that. But I think that the Trump thing is going to be there until Trump dies. And I think Trump is not going to die for another at least 10 years. During the intervening time, he is going to continue to be a thorn in this party's side. I mean, if the Republicans lose to Joe Biden in 2024, if Trump was the nominee, or if Trump's not the nominee, he is going to continue to blame the party for not making him the nominee. And that's going to continue to be a thorn in the side. And there are going to be politicians like Matt Gaetz, the future Matt Gaetz or whatever. Time will move, of course. Marjorie Taylor Greene will get older. Maybe she'll run for president one day. We can only hope. These people will court Donald Trump and say the party betrayed Donald Trump, and that will be the way that they try to achieve power. And I mean, I then see that being a fight that, takes us out to 2028, at which point we are now into 12 years of Trump having a thumbprint on this party. And that I think will take about a similar amount of time to really kind of clear out, if ever, if ever. Maybe this is just what conservative politics is now. I tend to think so. And that's what I think Democrats in Congress need to start to realize is like the game is not fair. That there is not going to be, um, there's not going to be a kinder, gentler Republican Party coming their way. I mean, look at what happened to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. More money, more problems. Cheney and Kinzinger feel the Trump effect. Both House Republicans have ranked in huge sums since they branded themselves as leaders of the anti-Trump wing of the party. So, yeah, they're making money right now. But the question is sort of like, where are they going? So you have the issue first of the Wyoming and Illinois Republican allies soon losing their seats next fall, the primary challengers who are hugging the Trump machine. But they're making a lot of money. So what does that mean? Maybe they run for president? Okay. Against who? Trump? Okay. How's that go? If they lost their primary to a Trump acolyte? Maybe this is just my pro wrestling brain working here, but like if you have a faction and you have like, I don't know, the babyface wrestlers going up against this faction and they lose to Scrubzo Magoo, the entry level goon, what would make me believe that this person now has a really good chance of beating, Uber Mini Boss or Head Honcho? I like, no, that's not how this works. Like, you don't lose to an acolyte of Trump's, especially if they get Trump's endorsement and then have any hope of beating Trump. Even if you get your campaign war chest padded out here. I think this is just a fever dream. Besides that, you have people like Elise Stefanik, who are bringing in good money still. So, and Elise Stefanik was like one of these people who originally was thought to be like a reasonable Republican, whatever the hell that means. But she's not one of those people. And she decided to throw her lot in with Trump. She's, kind of trying to split the difference between the Gates wing of the party and this more establishment wing of the party. But look, I think long term the Gates wing of the party wings out. Matt Gaetz is the millennial Roy Moore. I'm aware of that, but Matt Gaetz is right on marijuana in a way that key Democrats, Joe Biden, are not, and all the Republican Party is not, in a way that ires many Republican voters, and they've never had a release valve until Matt Gaetz to kind of consider. Beyond that, look, Matt Gaetz talking about conservatorship and free Britney, yeah, it's fun to chortle that she's not 17 anymore, Matt Gaetz. Hit Me Baby One More Time was a long time ago. I know that you're fond of that album cover, Matt. But it's also worth noting that Matt Gaetz is getting himself out there and talking about that. And to a Republican voter, emphasis on a Republican voter who likes Britney Spears and maybe likes marijuana, yes, they exist. There are Gen Xers and late millennials who are getting older, landed pretty good jobs, maybe are slightly religious, maybe always had pop-oriented sensibilities in music, have no problem with gay people or marijuana, but still, for whatever reason, really didn't have a problem with Donald Trump and like didn't see the disconnect there. They exist. They 100% exist, and they might have gotten the vaccine too. Like they're out there. I think we think it's all MAGA. It's not all MAGA chud. MAGA Chud's going to win the primary. MAGA Chud shows up. MAGA Chud follows politics a lot more closely than the person I just described. The person I just described does vote when it comes time for the November election every 4 years. MAGA Chud is going to show up in the primary against Liz Cheney because MAGA Chud watches enough news that MAGA Chud knows that Liz Cheney needs to go down. And like in a state that has 500,000, like that's really all you need. Like the kind of casual, tolerable Republican, they're going to be completely countervailed by ravenous primary voters because primary voters tend to be more partisan. Um, Here's the thing. Speaking about the voting rights bill, I think it's important for Democrats to win on a national level. I think it's even more important for Democrats to win on a state level, and win fast because Republicans at a national level are scary, led by Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't lead state Republicans, but the Trump effect and like the dumbing down in the primary voter and the fact that like MAGA Chud that I just mentioned, who will show up for Liz Cheney, they'll be out and voting like this. And that's where a lot of these state critters are able to get juice and kind of like ride the waves, because a lot of these votes, a lot of these elections are low turnout, kind of high engagement sort of voters, and so like the partisan activists are really perfect for this. This is why like you see like the Texas state Republican Party get so nutty. This is why you see the Arizona state Republican Party get so nutty. The Tennessee state Republican Party is really nutty and really scary, and I know there are some people who listen to this show who, not thrilled with the Democrats to the point where it's like, I'm not going to vote for the Democrats, even to run state level. Even if I'm in a safe blue state, those Democrats tend to be worse, like California and New York. It's no accident there's a recall against another Democratic governor, like in my lifetime. This time against Gavin Newsom, but I remember Gray Davis, and that's how Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor. And then, of course, obviously Andrew Cuomo is a disgrace, horrible guy, blue Trump, whatever you want to call him. I get that that's a problem, and their management of COVID-19 has not been ideal either. But in Tennessee, health department officials were ordered last week to not even acknowledge that August is National Immunization Awareness Month. In an email that was obtained by News Channel 5 in Tennessee here. So, like, this is a local news investigation that I found. And they start looking into this. The Tennessee Department of Health halted all vaccine outreach to kids, not just for COVID-19, but for all diseases, amid pressures from the GOP. Staff ordered to remove the agency logo from any documents providing vaccine information to the public. The agency will also end all COVID-19 events at schools, even though they've mostly served adults. And if teens get a two-dose vaccine like Moderna, which we're increasingly seeing is a much better vaccine than Johnson & Johnson. I'm not trying to give anyone pause who has Johnson & Johnson, but when it comes time for booster shots, I would encourage my friends who have gotten Johnson & Johnson to maybe be um, very mindful that he signed up for a booster shot. It looks like there are some problems with the J&J one, not like life-threatening ones, but some. The two-shot ones are better. Moderna is the two-shot one, and now they're telling teens not to go get it. It won't remind them to go back to get their second dose. Teens are intentionally stripped from the mailing list for reminder postcards. So, like, even if you wanted your teen to get that vaccine shot, or even if your teen wanted to get that vaccine shot, they're not getting the info to go and do it. So, like, they wouldn't know if it's okay for them to show up. So by removing the reminder, it makes them feel very likely that they're not going to get the shot. They'd basically have to go there and demand it. That's heartbreaking stuff, man. This anti-intellectualism, the anti-vaxism, the anti-information, the fake news problem, all of this stuff, the birtherism, going back this last decade, culminating in I don't want to get vaccines anymore. We're going to have my state government get rid of not just the COVID-19 vaccine, which remember that was bad because it was rushed. What about the polio vaccine? Have we seen enough data on that one? What about the vaccine for measles, mumps, rubella? Have we seen enough evidence on that, or like, do we really need it? We need to get some more science on that one. They're not waiting for anything. Every objection is a Trojan horse for their anti-intellectual fears of these vaccines. There are certain problems with them. As I said, J&J is not perfect. The Moderna one has some risks too, with like heart stuff. We all knew this. We all know that when you take medicine, there is always the risk of side effects. And you have to calibrate that risk against the risk of getting COVID 19 and being hospitalized, particularly being hospitalized for having the Delta variant. And for me, it was not worth it to run the risk of being hospitalized. And also for me, I did not think it was a responsible thing to go back to teaching a lot of people and seeing people regularly and not doing everything I could to be as low of a valence of viral transmission as possible. And the vaccine, all the studies say, make me lower valence on that. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, meanwhile, at the CDC and at the Department of Education, God, this is alarming. The COVID 19 numbers, as I'm taping this, are starting to creep back into 30,000 range, which is where we were when we did the lockdown and shutdown. We didn't get it all the way down here this time around. We got it down to 15,000, which is pretty goddamn good. Let's be real about that. 15,000 is a number we need to start feeling like, okay, that like you can kind of chill. Like this disease is not going to disappear in the same way that like the food is never disappears. But like 15,000, I think, is a tolerable level of a nationwide caseload. 35,000 to 40,000 getting back up there. And we've seen how these spikes can work. And the thing about the Delta variant is it is on the move. It is hospitalizing people at a considerable rate. Seems to be a little bit more aggressive. And meanwhile, you have stuff like what I was just talking about with the GOP in Tennessee removing vaccinations for kids. And you have Biden and the Democrats and the Democratic administration now here on a national level trying to get people back into schools, back into schools, back into schools. It is July 14th as I tape this. Labor Day, which is for some schools a start point. Many schools start in August now these days. I try to get out a little bit earlier. But like the 1st of September is a good 6 or 7 weeks away. And we've seen how this disease can spike pretty quickly in 6 to 7 weeks. And the other thing I think about now, too, is that the numbers that we look at, all the data that I look at when I look at the previous year's COVID 19 numbers, the previous year's COVID 19 numbers are with schools largely shut down. Now, of course, I think most people listening to the show would agree with the statement of the U.S. could have and should have done more during the last year, especially when it comes to taking care of essential workers, but even to just shutting down general activities. It would have been good to have businesses shut down for longer, honestly. We all can think of ways that the United States could have done much better when it comes to this response. That being said, the United States did do key things to slow down the way that we used to do things circa 2019. Like what I jokingly refer to as the before time sometimes. And one of those things was students largely were not in schools last year. And even with that, we still had very, very high COVID 19 numbers. Now, the counter, of course, is yes, but now Americans are starting to get vaccinated, and that's great. We still have 30% of adults who aren't vaccinated, and an even higher number percentage of children who aren't vaccinated. And we're about to get those children back into schools. And let me tell you something about children as someone who works with children. They get sick, they transmit diseases at a higher rate than usual. It's what being a kid is about because it builds up your immune system. This, I think, has the potential to be a real disaster for the Biden administration. And I think politically speaking, it is going to happen the first year of his administration. So it will probably feel a little bit rear view by the time we get to the 2024 election. So if I'm not sitting here and going, this is going to cost Joe Biden the next election. Even if it goes really bad, it probably should. Like in a fair world, like this is a pretty big all in that Joe Biden's making right now, and there's some evidence to suggest that like caution might actually be the stronger course of action here. But Joe Biden's going to go all in on this. He's going all in on this. You could see the COVID-19 numbers get back up to 100,000. Now, what does that mean for the Republicans? That's where it's going to get really interesting. Do Republican governors go, we have to shut back down our states, thanks Joe Biden, and try to get that dog to hunt? Do they keep their states open and pretend that this isn't happening? Na 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 na. Will that work for Republican hopeful governors who are trying to run for president? I mean, there are just a lot of variable here. Or maybe, schools reopen and this isn't a big deal. Entirely possible that this shakes out any number of ways, but this is one to continue to watch. Another one that I think to continue to watch, at least on some level, someone I care about deeply is very into the condo collapse because she just likes these types of stories. I'm interested in it because it seems to be slowly undoing Ron DeSantis's political fortunes here. Ron DeSantis, I think, in a lot of ways, had played things absolutely perfectly to be the inheritor to the Trump mantle, and I think long term Ron DeSantis wins. So even though I think this is maybe dooming him for 2024, I think we're not done with Ron DeSantis. And you see this guy run in not, they'll do the rewrite and they'll rebrand the guy. He'll be gray haired. I'll be gray haired. I'll be like, really? We're running Ron DeSantis? What? This guy and now his kid, and his kid's going to have like a MAGA t shirt. I'm like, I remember when they were teaching you when you were a baby to say MAGA. It was like your first word. Love the wall. And whatever else, things that your dad made you say. Ron DeSantis appears to be in trouble right now with this building review here in Florida after the condo collapse. DeSantis is in a tough position. He's a Republican. He's really business friendly. Florida is a real heavy tourist thing. You don't want to turn this into a state of alarm, scare people out from tourism. However, if you do nothing, you're also going to have problems on your hands. So what does that look like? Well, let's get into the Miami Herald article. Miami Herald continues to be one of my favorite publications in the nation. Quote, I can just say, just from having talked with people who have been here on the scene, people who've done stuff, that I think this building had problems from the start. Let's just put it that way, Ron DeSantis answered. So I wouldn't jump to conclusions about it, but at the same time, if there's something identified that would have implications broader than the Champion Towers, then obviously we're going to take a look at that and act as appropriate. This is Ron DeSantis commenting on the Champion Towers collapse. And the revelations that there have been structural issues with the Champion Towers and that there might be structural issues that affect all 40-year-old buildings. Also this response from DeSantis really begs the question about governmental, reactions. Okay, it's a 40-year-old building. At some point in the last 10 years, government should start coming in. Why I say 10 years? Because at that point, the building's like 30 years old. The first 20 years, of course, you want to have like an annual inspection, but let us assume I'm like not a buildings guy, whatever. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I don't architect. I don't techt. I don't arc. But let us assume that a building's probably in okay condition the first 10 years. The same with the first 10 years of a guitar, you don't have to worry about it. But year 50 of a guitar or a building, you might need to start taking a look at some of the structural stuff occasionally. Is there any cracks in the wood? Are there any cracks in the structural columns? That would be what you would need to do. That apparently has not been happening in the state of Florida. And DeSantis, in the absence of doing anything, has created a vacuum. A political vacuum, a regulatory vacuum, and nature abhors a regulatory vacuum. And so, in the absence of broader state and county regulation, the insurance industry in Florida has begun its own assessment of liability in the condominium market. And insurance companies have sent letters to owners of condominiums that are 40 years and older in South Florida last week that have asked for proof that their buildings have passed all inspections or they will lose their coverage. So, what DeSantis is really flirting with here, and this is the disaster, is that the insurance companies are going to arrive at a fiduciary impasse wherein that's just a fancy way of saying a financial situation where they realize that these buildings have issues. They don't want to insure them anymore. It's very obvious that there's something wrong with the buildings to the general public because these buildings can't be insured. These owners have to sell these buildings. And essentially, the insurance industry reveals to the state of Florida and Governor DeSantis, who didn't want to do anything about this and didn't want to see nothing, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, Ron DeSantis. It's going to be apparent because of the insurance industry that Ron DeSantis has mismanaged this. I think that this just puts DeSantis into a real fading situation here. And Donald Trump, if he needed to fight with DeSantis, could, but I think DeSantis has his hands full. And even a passing comment about building inspections and how, I would have done building inspections, of course. I of course know that there's structural. It doesn't matter if it's true, guys. Remember, like this is Donald Trump we're talking about. We were talking about Ashley Babbitt and the 1-6 insurrection to begin this show here. Trump will lie about anything. He'll, of course, lie that he loves building inspections. Of course. But I think DeSantis is done for the time being. This is not the end of his political career. Like this is not, dead boy in a car trunk sort of situation. But this is a lot for Ron to try to juggle and claim that he is a Reagan-esque sort of figure here. I just don't think that dog hunts at this point. Speaking of dogs that don't hunt, or dogs that aren't hunter, or hunters who are dogs, I'm getting there. There's a transition happening. Hunter Biden is back in the news yet again. Dude, okay. Look, I feel for Joe Biden. I want to open up this segment like with this because like the Biden story in a lot of ways is like sort of a weird parallel to my family's story. And I don't think about it all the time. It doesn't pop into my head every time I see these stories. But like when I was racking this up to talk about Hunter Biden, I couldn't help but like, think about the poignancy of being a father and losing one of your sons and having a surviving son because that is the struggle that my father went through. For those of you who don't know, new listeners, my brother in 1985, a year before I was born, fell into a swimming pool that was being drained out because my parents were worried that swimming pools were exactly the type of thing that your kid could fall into. But they're actually never more dangerous than when they're half filled with water because there's no easy way out. And my parents were moving into this new house and trying to drain out that pool. And my dad was just in the wrong place at the wrong time while my brother was in the backyard, walking around. And one thing led to another. And my father had to go through like a heartbreaking tragedy, as did my mother. And in this sense, though my father fails to see this in Joe Biden's own story, sad really in its own way. This is sort of the Hunter Biden, Beau Biden story, right? Beau Biden, this decorated guy. Beau Biden probably would have been ran by the Democrats for president at some point. For real. Oh, yeah. They would have ran Beau. Beau had the right moxie. Father was a senator. All the right photographs from, youth and young mandom with all the right people. The valorous military career, all of that. Hunter Biden is a grifter. I'm in this sense, I'm not like Hunter Biden. No, I mean, look, your boy enjoys a smoke now and again, but like, I'm not involved in money laundering. Hunter Biden's a horrible dude. Also, like, Hunter Biden is also into like really hard drugs and stuff too. Like, this guy's a really, really troubled guy. He's a bad guy. And the story here with Joe Biden and his surviving son, Hunter Biden, is a tragic one that I have the deepest empathy for, which is Joe Biden loves his surviving son. He knows he's a fuck up. But what he wants more than anything is to not have to bury two sons before he dies. I get it. I really, really, really get it. And so like, though I joked about, releasing my Hunter Biden sex tape, my sex tape with Hunter Biden during the election, and I'm going to keep joking about Hunter Biden from time to time. I like want to start off this segment really speaking to that core for me. Like, and I even look at Hunter Biden too as a slightly tragic figure in the sense of like, you know, imagine just like not being the type of guy your brother was. Like you're just not that, and you're like in this like family of expectations, and like uh, all this family is like really ridiculous, lofty expectations. I know we talk about fail sons, but in slight sympathy for fail sons, those same fail sons often are asked to to be successful at a much higher level than the average person's level of success. And like, yes, they get a head start, but like, dude, sometimes people are just born of mediocre or less than intelligence, right? Like, even if you're rich, you can be born stupid. And I'm not like saying ignorant. I'm saying like, you know, some people just ain't all that bright. You ever met Don Jr.? I mean, I haven't met him, but like, look, money ain't saving Don Jr.'s brain, right? Hunter Biden, I don't think he's like Don Jr. stupid, but I don't think he's very smart. I mean, I think this guy's a grifter. So let's get into the Hunter Biden story. And now that I've gotten all emotional and wax poetic on Hunter Biden, but I wanted to, I like maybe frame it up like that. The White House is creating a system wherein Hunter Biden will be able to sell his Hunter Biden artwork, which I will admit was less bad than I thought it was going to be. It's not good. I would never buy it. And like the amount that he's asking for, it's insane. Um, I thought the art critics and the critiques of it, like he's not devoid of all talent. He's not like a great artist, but like he's he's okay. He's okay. He's fine. He's fine. It's you know, these are the type of paintings. If you told me he was selling them for a couple grand or whatever, I think it'd be fine. What blows my mind is that like, he's trying to get $500,000, $1 million for some of these things, which screams to me money laundering. But if Biden was trying to sell paintings for 2 to 5 grand, I'd be on here defending Hunter Biden. For real. For real. I'd be on here saying, look, I get it. Like, there's an ethics and propriety thing. Walter Schwab here at the end of this article has a point that this is a good backdoor to be exploited and widened out later, and maybe that's a good reason to keep the door closed entirely. That's an okay argument. I'd be very down with that. But I'd also say that 5 grand, upwards of 10 grand, is not ridiculous prices to ask for paintings. It's not. It happens all the time. It was Hunter is Hunter's work up to the 10 grand level? I'd argue not. But like, if you told me I bought a Hunter Biden for 5 grand or whatever, he's a Manhattan socialite. Those people overpay for fucking everything from sofas to end tables to paintings. Like, like why wouldn't like why not pay 5 grand for a painting when you're going to pay $500 for a coffee maker? That wouldn't make me blush and wouldn't necessarily scream money laundering the same way as 6 figures or more for these mediocre efforts, like these not like excellent efforts, things that you couldn't hang out in public displays. Yes, like the point that our critics are making is that these paintings are beneath the standard of hanging it up in a 5-star restaurant. And to that point, because they do not meet that standard, they aren't worth what they're being valued. And this system is really asinine, and it's an asinine system for an asinine thing. The White House says it's created a system that will allow Hunter to sell his artwork without knowing the names of the buyers to prevent anyone from trying to curry favor by purchasing a painting during a planned auction this fall. Walter Schwab called this whole thing ridiculous and very disappointing. Biden has pursued a career in art recently after writing a memoir and becoming a mediocre author and releasing that at the start of the Biden presidency. He's currently under investigation by the DOJ regarding his business dealings with China and other matters. Remember, other things that Hunter Biden has done in addition to his business dealings with China, in addition to writing a book to cash in on being Hunter Biden and having Hunter Biden problems, and selling it right when his dad became president because like no one would have gave a shit in 2014. I mean, like, yes, it's probably legal, but like, look at what this guy is doing. It's clearly improper. It's not the type of stuff that we want to have happen. And anyone who is a hashtag resistor, who is all like, I'm upset about Ivanka. I'm upset about Eric Trump. I'm upset about Don Jr. If like this does not meet that same spectrum to you, you're not looking at this with clear set of eyes here. It's pretty clear that like Hunter Biden's improper. And then like the last one, the cherry on top is sitting on the Ukraine oil company board and getting paid five figures a month to do so, like mid five figures, $50,000, $60,000 a month to do so for his oil knowledge. This mediocre artist, this mediocre writer. I mean, it's alarming. He said, Hunter Biden said, I'm confident that a professional and objective review of these matters will demonstrate that I handled my affairs legally and appropriately, including with the benefit of professional tax advisors. Walter Schaub said of this whole new plan by the White House here, they've outsourced government ethics to an art dealer. Let me read a little bit from his profile here, too. Um, the idea that you could even do a blind version of Hunter Biden's artwork where you'd sell the artwork to somebody who didn't know who the artist was, which, like, is that even a fair sale at that point? And moreover, if it's a mysterious, famous celebrity artist, isn't that also just a way of pumping up the value on the artwork? Maybe people think it's someone more famous and more important and more relevant than Hunter Biden. Like, that's entirely possible. On the website, his bio reads as follows. Biden has been a lifelong artist that has devoted his artistic career to both the written word and the visual arts. A lawyer by trade who now devotes his life to the creative arts, he brings a myriad of experiences creating a powerful and impactful pieces of art. Biden's paintings range from photographic mixed media to abstract works on canvas, Yupo paper, wood, and metal. I guess he does word too. He often incorporates oil, acrylic, ink, and the written word into his work. See, it is word. I was right. I didn't say wood wrong. I was just several words ahead of the sentence. No one's believing this, Chris. It creates a distinctively unique experience that have become signature Biden. A distinctly unique experience that have become signature Biden. And you can even read like an interview. Like they have not been hiding this. So even if the White House comes around and says, oh, okay, you got to hide it now. We know who Hunter Biden is. This bio is there. It's going to exist on the Wayback Machine. And Walter Shaw brings up other points here that I'm sure some of you have already been thinking about. There is no way to actually guarantee that the buyers remain anonymous. There's nothing we can do to monitor to make sure that Hunter Biden or anyone else in the White House doesn't find out that the dealer keeps his or her promise, that the buyers don't call the White House, ask for a meeting, and say, hey, I just bought the president's son's art for $500,000. That is actually not an illegal thing to do. Hey, to call up the White House and say, I just bought Hunter Biden's artwork for $500,000 is not illegal. There is a clear Trumpian implication there. I bought this for $500,000, this piece of artwork, which you and I both know, without me saying it, is wildly overvalued. And that Hunter Biden, wildly overvalued, as a way of sort of letting us know that this, you're not just buying the artwork. When you buy a Hunter Biden piece, you buy the Biden name. And the Biden name means something. Or apparently it can't mean anything because we got to keep it anonymous. No, like it's very, very clear that this is grifting. And Schaub goes on a little bit further. He says that the arrangement sets a dangerous precedent. Even if you happen to trust Joe Biden, what if the next president has the character of a Donald Trump, who is going to run for president again, I might add at the end of this episode? This would be a perfect mechanism for funneling bribes to that president. So like the wraparound theme, the moral of today's story, we'll be back again here to discuss Haiti and Cuba on the next episode. I want to do like a world news one as a separate, but since I'm solo here, let's just keep it as a domestic monologue for this one. The wraparound theme on this one is Joe Biden's a step behind. And much like Obama with looking forward and not backwards, Joe Biden is doggedly set on looking forward, or in the case of Hunter Biden, not even looking forward, just looking past the problems that are here, that sit before us. And he does so at all of our peril. And it's okay to be angry at Joe Biden about that. You're not betraying the Democratic Party. You're not going to suddenly become a Republican for feeling this way. And Joe Biden's what we got. So this is the guy you got to yell at. Unless there is some very good plan to usurp the Democratic establishment's control of the Democratic Party here in the upcoming presidential primaries for the incumbent president. If there's a plan for that, please let me know. I'd like to see it. That sounds very interesting. I'd love to read more and tell people all about it on Don't Worry About the Government. Should that plan exist? Okay. In the absence of that plan, Joe Biden's the game in town. It's okay to be angry at this guy. And it's okay to be loudly angry and tell people, yeah, you know what? I'm glad that he's president in some levels, but when it comes to this, Joe Biden kind of sucks because he does. Joe Biden's not doing what it takes to prevent another Trump presidency from happening. And if you thought a Trump presidency was bad, and if you're someone like me who thought a Trump presidency was enough alone to encourage not just yourself to go to the polls, but your entire audience. Like, I stood on the microphone and I encouraged all of you to go and vote for Joe Biden. A thing that, like, I don't feel any onus to be like, you got to go vote, guys, and go and vote for this candidate or whatever. I told you who I supported in the primaries. I didn't say go and vote for her. Like I told, I told you who, like, I supported, the Joe Biden and Trump thing is different because Donald Trump is a really, really dangerous guy. And Joe Biden was the only alternative. But I knew when we were voting for this guy that you were going to have to cajole this guy and yell at this guy and scream at this guy and hate this guy to do something, anything to put up bulwarks to actually check Donald Trump or hold Trump accountable. And then Trump did 1-6 at the post-election and, like, I mean, Joe Biden's just not rising to the occasion. It's okay to be angry at him for that. That's going to do it for this episode of Don't Worry About the Government. For those of you watching the video feed, I apologize for my chapped lips. It's tough on the monologue show because I don't want to just, like, stop talking to pour myself a glass of water. Because, like, on the audio feed, that sounds weird, right? Like, hey, or you like grab a cola and start drinking cola or whatever. But then I get chapped lips. It's hard. Like, this monologue stuff, not easy. It's not easy. And on the video feed, you see, there's no edits. Like this is a straight monologue show. So yeah, I appreciate y'all supporting the show over at patreon.com/DWATG. I can tell you at this point, if you're supporting the show, a good portion of the show's monthly budget is going to a much needed website renovation. It's underway. We had one website crash already. Ronnie and Joe have been emailing with me and my dude Dustin over at Green J Media. If you're looking for webpage help and assistance, I'm plugging him. Hopefully he doesn't mind. Or I'd like, hopefully he doesn't. We haven't even talked about my politics, but he's doing it. And we got him budgeted, and he's on it. And I really appreciate what he's doing. So that's, and I really appreciate y'all helping me do that because, like, that's what we need to take the show to the next level. Like, the SEO crashed here in January. I don't understand web page and internet. And I know I've been saying that for a long time, but I really don't. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm good at. Like, I can hear a song and tell you all the chords in it. Obviously I know how to record, the podcast and edit it. And I've done some pretty sophisticated research oriented episodes that had, like, edited in clips and everything too. I do these long monologue shows. There's a lot of stuff I know how to do. I don't know how to do web pages very well. And it, like, I kind of get it. It's not like I don't get it at all, but it's like, it's just not a thing that my brain snaps into. Oh, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do like that it does on the good stuff, the stuff that I'm actually good at. And so I'm thankful for the help, and I'm thankful for the support for the show during this time as I renovate it so that I can grow the show out here so that we can get more people coming in for a buck a show and helping out the show. Because that's how the show grows. That's what the business model is about too. It's not about, like, getting a big money sponsor, getting the nation state of Turkey to finance me to deny the Armenian genocide or something like that. It's literally about getting everyone who listens to the show to say, like, look, it's worth a buck. And getting,
I think all of us who work out in the real world, but I'm not saying y'all who are like still in school or whatever aren't in the real world, but like, those of us who are now like in our careers or whatever, realize that all of our time's valuable. And that like, even the stuff you want, things that you like to keep those businesses open or whatever, you got to support the businesses, whether it's like going and buying burritos at the local food truck or whatever. In my case, going and buying barbecue at the local food truck, or supporting the local way too hot chicken place. Tomorrow that's Ricky's night. I'm pumped. Like, it's important to support those businesses, and we all just gotta like do like a little part. You can't single-handedly like lift up any one show or lift up any one business or whatever, but like, mindful consumption, mindful consumerism, all these things. And a lot of you are on board with what I'm throwing down on that. And I live what I preach. I think this is the only way. The alternatives that we all just like live at the largesse of major corporations, even more than we already do now. How gross is that? If you want to follow the show, you can follow the show at DWATG. That's where I'm at on Twitter. Less so these days. I'm blissfully less online. It's good. It's very good to be less online. Don'tWorry.tv is the homepage. It's getting renovated. Maybe it'll be more than a black background at some point. My God, what if? What if? But you can also subscribe to the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify. I want to thank you all so much for supporting. My name is Chris Novembrino, and until the next one, bye-bye.